Welcome to the Chief Endurance Officer Podcast. I'm your host, Greg McDonough. Each week, we hear real time stories from athletes and CEOs on how to maximize performance through an endurance mindset. Let's get started. Well, welcome to the Chief Endurance Officer Podcast. I'm your host, Greg McDonough. Today's guest, I'm super excited to have on the show. He is a seasoned author, speaker, consultant, shares his experiences on technology, company culture, personal development. His book, The CEO's Digital Survival Guide, provides business leaders with the essential strategies to navigate the digital world and safeguard their organizations. An avid traveler, his journey is to complete a marathon in all 50 states. I can't wait to dig into that. He is the founder and CEO of Stimulus Technology. Please welcome Nathan Whittacre. Nathan, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks, Greg. It's great to be here.
And as I mentioned in the intro, I can't wait to dig into those 50 states and know where you are. But before we jump into that, Nathan, I love talking about the endurance mindset. And I'm curious, how has your endurance mindset impacted your life unexpectedly?
Unexpectedly, it certainly pushes me through a lot of difficult challenges that come up. Whether it's running a business for 30 years this summer, it'll be 30 years for us, or
Congrats.
family challenges. Just being able to know that sometimes the pain is temporary, and we just have to push through and then when the pain is too much, when to stop going down a road we shouldn't go down. So, unexpectedly, um, you know, it's interesting. Like things come up that you don't expect. My one of my daughters ended up having sudden cardiac arrest in January this year, and she's healthy girl in high school, and collapsed in the middle of her class, and just luckily she survived. Amazing work by the teachers and everybody there. But I think it's hard sometimes when those tragedies come along in our lives, which we all endure something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Is finding the positive in that, and finding that we can get through it with sufficient resilience. And I think, endurance, the word itself is endure. But I don't think we should necessarily just be enduring our experiences. We should find, positive outcomes, sometimes hopefully joy in the endurance, through the journey. But there's certainly times that it's tougher, and when you're sitting in the hospital with your daughter, or those phone calls that you get that you never want to receive, whether it's in work or your personal life. But getting through it is what makes the outcome more special, I guess, in the end.
Nathan, I appreciate you sharing that story, and I'm very thankful that she's okay. As a parent myself, I could only imagine hearing that phone call or getting that message. You've got my palms sweating just thinking about it. Digging into your entrepreneurial journey, can you tell us a story, I think, of a time where business was harder than you expected it to be, and your endurance, your fitness, your routines helped you sort of mitigate through those situations?
How many hours do we have? Oh man, 30 years there's a lot of ups and downs. I think a couple of things, and some things that led me, on this journey of physical endurance. But I think back at the Great Recession. I know it's kind of a long memory now. We've gone through COVID, and that's kind of our recent, difficulty in business. But I remember, distinctly, we were much smaller then. We were still a family business. My board of directors were, my brother and my parents, and it was just family. Having to make some really tough decisions of where to go with the company in 2008, 2009. Las Vegas was interesting. We were, we always thought that we would never get hit with, be affected by a recession as much as we were. And tourism collapsed. Our construction market, collapsed during that time. And, Las Vegas was hit really hard. About a third of our clients went into bankruptcy, or, some type of, change in their business, major reduction in staff. And so we were hit pretty hard during that time as a business too. And how do we recover and, maintain our business when we see our clients suffering? We found ways around it. A lot of clients were scaling back, their technology services. And some of them decided to let go of internal IT staff that they had and looking to outsource their IT services. So I, unfortunately for them, for people that lost their jobs, because of staff reduction, good for us that we were able to step in and offer a solution that these businesses could continue receiving IT services through us at a cheaper price because we could outsource and do things more efficiently. So, it just took a lot of change on the way we marketed our services and looking at clients that were still thriving and proposing additional services to them. So really remember a distinct meeting that we were sitting in our office. We had just moved into some new offices the year before and just going line by line, where can we save expenses and who can
Mm.
we provide more services to and markets that we can go after. And luckily with some tough decisions we did internally and some really good marketing and sales, we were able to actually increase revenues during those 3-4 years and not just survive but thrive. And that's what, over and over again, what we've tried to do is in our company is, sometimes make those tough decisions. Sometimes we wait too long to make them, but we end up having to make them and we, make it through. Just again, I've used the word resilience a couple of times, but just getting through and finding the solutions that make it successful on the other side.
Yeah, I appreciate you talking about making tough decisions, and where my mind went when you're telling that part of the story is the team aspect. Like, can you give us a little bit more insight of as a management team, as a group, when a tough decision needs to be made? Is there a process that you follow, or is there, are you whiteboarders? Are you journaling? Like, can you give us a sense of how you unpack making that tough decision?
Well, for me, it starts. You mentioned journaling. One thing I learned during that is I hired a CEO coach, and I heard a speaker that came into our group during that time, and he talked about having personal one-to-ones. And so once a month, I sit down with myself. It's the most important meeting that I have during the month, and I have a journal, and I bring important information, whether it's company financials, maybe our goals, where we're going, some information on my personal life, goals that I'm working on, and I write for usually a couple hours and just kind of put my thoughts down on pen and paper, and set, new goals for the next month, that, shooting forward. It might be a readjustment of annual goals for the business, different ideas, things that we need to do. And then, we go back, we have, a, monthly leadership meeting now inside the company and then quarterly, meetings. If it's more urgent, we'll do something sooner. But we generally, I bring these issues that I'm seeing, trying to see as a CEO of the company, I'm trying to look out on the horizon. What issues do we have coming up in the next, month, year, 5 years? What are, immediate things we need to resolve? What are long-term issues we need to resolve? And then we work through it as a company. We just actually did this about a week and a half ago. We had a project we're working on that went a little bit sideways. An unexpected issue came up and from a third party. And so I had some ideas. I sat down, wrote a bunch of things down, and then I went to my team and brought up a blank Word document, and we just started throwing out ideas. How can we resolve this? And after about an hour and a half conversation, we had a good strategy of how to tackle it and assignments that we all took away to resolve the issue immediately. So that's generally what we do. That's what I found to be successful, is just brainstorming, and then don't spend too much time on it, because you can brainstorm forever and just come up with ideas forever. You got to start taking actions, and to resolve the issue as soon as possible.
And Nathan, I'm curious, in your journaling process, do you have a leading question that you start with, or is it just whatever comes from head to hand to pen to paper, and it's really just a data dump of what's on your mind?
It's it starts with what happened in the last month. So it's pure journaling, what are things transpired, and then that usually leads into things that I want to work on. I usually go back and look at what I wrote down the previous month,
Mm.
maybe some of the goals or things that I'd been working on. And I'll often flip back and look at what my personal annual goals are and see how I'm making progress towards those, and if there's anything that I need to adjust. So it's a combination of just like reflecting on the last month, what happened over the last 4 weeks, and then where I am at. Am I on track or off track towards monthly goals, and then annual goals, and then anything that I got to focus on immediately.
Yeah, yeah. So speaking of personal goals, you've got this goal of running a marathon in all 50 states. I guess question number one is, where are you from 0 to 50 on that goal chart?
So I'm actually making it harder on myself too. So there's actually a club of doing marathon in every 50 states, all 50 states under 4 hours. And
Cool.
so I have two lists going. I have a list of states that I've done, but I didn't get under 4 hours, and then the states that I've accomplished under 4 hours. So I'm starting. I have about 15 states that I've ran a marathon in. 8 of them are under 4 hours. So some of the states I've done an Ironman in, and it's very hard to run a marathon after biking 112 miles and doing that at performance. And so those are most of my states that I've missed, are the ones that I've done an Ironman in. So I'm hoping to hit 10 by the end of the year is my goal. So we'll see. It'll take a couple of good marathons this fall.
Yeah, we have to keep us posted. I'd love to know, where'd that idea come from? Where did the 50 states in under 4 hours, how did that manifest itself?
So it's actually for my wife. She's finished it. She started that journey quite a few years before I did. She's a very accomplished runner, and we actually got married it'll be 2 years probably by the time this podcast airs. And I was just really impressed with that goal. I was trying to find a goal for myself to keep me going on the journey. I've done a number of marathons and Ironman events, and I wanted something that was long term that I could work towards, but also
Mm.
involve the travel and get to know the country a little bit better. I also really liked James Lawrence, who's known as the Iron Cowboy. He
Yeah.
did 50 Ironman of 50 states in 50 days. Definitely not on that challenge, and then he ended up doing 100 Ironman in 100 days at his home state in Utah. It's just, I guess, having a longer term goal to work towards. Marathoning is definitely a goal in itself, but having, this 10 plus year goal to accomplish something that, doesn't just involve the physical side of it. It's also logistics, getting to these locations, finding, marathons that make sense, places I'd like to go and visit and get to know a little bit better. Just is a lot of fun. It's challenging in its own way too, just mixing with, schedules with kids and all the other things I have going on. It makes it even more challenging. So it's interesting, but tough too.
Yeah. I find that the logistics around these races are almost more difficult than the race itself.
Yes. Yeah. Some of the marathons I want to go do are like, maybe 6, 8 hours away from an airport that we can fly into. And so just getting to them is kind of tough, or maybe there's not a lot of flights during the week. And so just the logistics have been a challenge. So we passed on some just because it was too difficult to even get to, and just wouldn't work around schedules.
So would you consider going to a state and running a marathon sort of on your own, or do these need to be sort of sanctioned events with a medal at the end and aid stations from start to finish?
Yeah, technically, so there is a club that's 50 under 4 hours. So there's actually a club. A guy started this list. They have to be certified courses, and so
Okay.
that adds some complexity too, because not all marathon courses are certified by USA Track and Field. So they have to be certified courses, sanctioned events with at least 10 runners or more at the event. And we were looking at some like July or August of this year, like kind of from a time frame would have made sense, but there was just none that of the states that we have left that we can go to that made sense logistically. There was one in Alaska, but it was too hard to get to for a short amount of time that we had. So it is logistically tough. That's a tough
So
problem. We often go to the list of marathons that are out there and say, I don't even know I want one to appear suddenly, but it doesn't always happen.
yeah, that would be too good to be true, right? Um, Maybe let's shift gears a little bit and talk about your book. The survival guide for CEOs. I would imagine, kind of by the time the ink dries, the technology has changed, and so one, I'd love to understand your the passion behind the publishing the book, and then two, like how can an audience member utilize its content in a way with technology moving so quickly?
So I'll start with the background. I love, anything outdoors. It's a lot of fun to just be outdoors and enjoy the environment. And a few years ago, I wanted to do something again challenging that I'd never done before. And I was involved with Boy Scouts, and we were on a scouting trip up in Yosemite National Park. And I saw the sign that said John Muir Trail, 215 miles. And I had no idea what the John Muir Trail was or, what this was involved with. So when we were done with the trip, I looked it up and found that this was, an iconic hiking trail through the Sierra Nevada mountains, and decided that that's what I wanted to set out and do over the next few years, is train and do a through backpacking hike. I'd never done, long distance backpacking before. Um, so I started doing a lot of research, joined some online forums, went to the local REI, and luckily the guy that I ran into at the REI had hiked the John Muir Trail twice. And so he gave me like a bunch of things not to do and what to do and what to buy. And I spent the next year or so training for it, buying a bunch of equipment, learning from a lot of people that had done it before, bought some books on it that I read, and successfully completed that hike in 13 days in 2018. And as I was on the hike, had a lot of time to myself. I did it as a solo hike and thought about, the challenges that business owners go through with technology, that it's often a journey, running a business. And, there's a lot of different aspects about running a business that are foreign to why the business owner started the company. The entrepreneur started the company. If you're a CPA and you want to, start a CPA firm, you do it because you really enjoy accounting. Or, if you're a dentist, you want to, work on people's teeth. But there's so many ancillary things that come along with owning and operating a business, especially for, a small business owner, that can seem daunting. And IT is probably one of the bigger ones of that, because we talk in a lot of acronyms. There's a lot of scary stuff that we throw out there, with cybersecurity and hacking and things like that. And then there's compliance requirements that come along all the time, that the government wants you to do things that don't seem normal or you don't want to do. And so when we, over 30 years now, I'm talking to business owners, there's always this concern of IT is this black box. I want it to work. I don't want to deal with it, but I want it to help my business. And because technology is, so important in everything we do in business. I mean, if you're listening to us today, it's because of technology that you're able to receive this
Mm.
podcast and watch or listen to us. The efficiency of technology allows us to now, work from anywhere in the world and do accounting anywhere, or doing a lot of these services from distance. And so it's a really important part of operating a business, is understanding how to use technology effectively. And so it was a long part of the story, kind of going back to the John Muir Trail is I realized that I didn't know anything about through backpacking, and I learned from a lot of experts, read a lot of materials, and was able to put this together. So I wanted to write a book that kept the discussion about technology simple enough that a business owner can open up the book, go to the section that they might be struggling with, whether it's cybersecurity or how to implement, new accounting systems or, use technology properly inside their business and just have, a overarching understanding of what needs to happen. And then they can have proper conversations with the experts in the field to implement what they want to do. So it's just a field guide to, operating a business with technology. And then the second part of your question of, the ink dried and then AI came out, right? To
Okay.
masks. And that, I mean, that was certainly, the big change that happened that there's, no discussion of generative AI in the book. And that's really changing the way that we do business today. And so, technology is always changing and there's always new things coming out. I think the fundamentals are still there of how to implement good technology inside your business, how to communicate it properly. And even with AI, it's that discussion of how do I use it? How do I incorporate it into my business operations? And how do I have the conversations that I need to with the experts that can help me implement that and make it successful? So, yeah, I could probably, rewrite this book every 6 months because it's changing so much. But the principles are still very, very much the same.
Absolutely. You mentioned the entrepreneurial journey, and for many of us, right, we start off with having something that we're good at and somebody's willing to pay. And then you find two clients, and then maybe you find a third client. And next thing you know, you need some staff. And all of a sudden, after a couple of years, hopefully, right now you're running a business and you're not delivering that service anymore. And it's a big change for that entrepreneur, like who loves doing interior design, for example. And now he or she's got to run a business every day. Um, so as you see these entrepreneurs kind of going from project-based work to running a business, what is sort of the number one red flag or advice you give them from a technology perspective? Like, when should that strategy be materialized as they're going through their journey?
I think it changed over the years. I'll answer that question because one of the really amazing things I think in the last 10 or so years that's happened is we've moved more and more to cloud services, whether you're using, Google Suite or Microsoft 365 or, some of these online project management softwares, QuickBooks Online. There's just so many tools that are available out there that, you know, 10 years ago, you'd have to have a server in your office. You'd have to have, buy this line of business application that you'd pay tens of thousands of dollars for. And it was very expensive to, have these high end applications. And so what's changed over the last 10 years is, a small business can take and use tools that were only available to large enterprises, 10 plus years ago. And so I think it's easier for, a solo person or a small team, call it 5 or less people, to handle IT generally on their own. There's just enough tools out there, easy enough, that you can be on your own. Once you start getting at about 5 or so people inside the company, there's, concerns about data security, about compliance, cybersecurity, as I mentioned, is the biggest, one of the biggest drivers that having a little bit of outside help, really goes a long way because there's just so many different aspects, especially from the security standpoint to ensure that everything works well. And then your team gets a little more complicated too, because you want to set up permissions correctly so that, one person can't delete the entire, organization's documents and cause major issues. You need to start implementing good backup solutions. So I guess about that 5 person size is when you need to start working with experts to get it working well. And it's not terribly expensive. It's probably worth more money to use that expert than using your time as a business owner to do that work. because you go into business to do what you're really good at, and that's where your value is, not adding users to Microsoft 365 environments. It's, to do that interior design work, to be that, business professional, doing great work. So it's just where the value is of your time.
Yeah, I'm completely following you there. And when you went back 10 years, you took me back to my old company, and we had a training division. And in that training division, we probably had, I don't know, 60 iMacs. And every night, the IT staff would have to refresh the computers and get the things that people were searching online for that they shouldn't have been searching while going through our training class. And as time develops, that footprint got smaller and smaller. The IT footprint got more into the cloud and more into the cloud. And what it reminds me of is the technology that's available to us now from an endurance perspective, right? If you think about the nutrition and your training peaks and all these tools and your Garmin and your power wattage and all these things that we're now utilizing from an endurance perspective at the everyday sort of athlete level, that was only at the elite level 10 years ago. So then it leads me to another question, Nathan. Like, so what's the next 10 years? What do you see in the future? Your crystal ball from a technology perspective over the next 10 years, or even an endurance perspective? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well.
Um, what we're going to see is AI doing a lot more automations, as software companies start incorporating these AI features into their applications. We're going to just see a lot of things that we would do, repetitively, just be automated, and the outputs will become much better. So I think that's going to be the major shift over the next 10 years. Certainly you can use ChatGPT and some of these other generative AI tools to do a lot of content generation and automations on your own, but we're going to see those become really part of what we do, every day. From an endurance perspective, it's interesting. I use software called Trainer Road for my training on the bike, and they've incorporated some AI features in their software, and it's just interesting to see, some of the adjustments that it suggests to my training schedule. I've always just self-coached. For a short stint that I had when I first started, I joined a triathlon group to help me mostly with my swim. And, but for the most part, I've self-coached, and I think the features are not perfect right now. Sometimes it makes suggestions that I really disagree with, and it gets mad at me. So I do my own thing anyways. But I think that that's going to improve. And as they get, AI requires a lot of data for training, and you look at a company like Tesla. And the reason that they've been really successful with their automation and really, um, their automated driving is so far ahead of any other company is because they've been recording what drivers have been doing for 20 years now. They just have so much data. And so in any aspect, whether, it's your endurance sports, your Garmin's or Training Peaks, or these companies just, have gathered data and will continue gathering a lot of data from people. The outcomes become much better because there's just so much more data to train these athletes. And you look at, a few years ago, in the Ironman scene, we had two Norwegian athletes that came out and they just really took over the whole Ironman scene. Gustav Iden, and I can't remember the other gentleman's name, but and it was all data, their scientific data. They were doing a lot of testing with blood and just a lot of things, lactic thresholds and a lot of things that we weren't doing. And I think as we have more and more data and have, a lot of automations to analyze that data, I think us as regular athletes and, whether it's entrepreneurs too, that data will help all of us to have better outcomes, that, those systems will understand really the way business works or the way our body works much better and have much better outcomes in the end.
Yeah. I find In the financial management world, where I live, I find that having better financial data allows for better business decision. Like you're always going to have that risk of the tails or wherever you're heading or the economy. But if you got some confidence in your data, and to your point about the more history we have and the more repetitions and the 20 years of driving behavior that Tesla had, the more that we have those experiences, the higher the chance that we're making a good business decision or an endurance decision.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I think it takes all of us to continue to collect that data, and then it's spotting the anomalies. And sometimes the anomalies in the data is, might not be able to be spotted by a human. Just a
Mhm.
small variance of a couple of percent may be, okay, well, that's within the margin of error. But if there's enough data that an autonomous system or an AI solution can say, if that variance is there, it might not seem important, but I've, seen 1,000 different times in that data where that has been important. Now we can have, better identification of it, because these computer systems have so much data to back it up. They can say, spot that issue much, much better. So I think, I think financial data, because there's just so much, especially, as you start growing the size of your business, there's just so much to look at. I think health outcomes is another one. You're looking, health data and health sciences. I think there's going to be big changes with this type of AI, looking at this data. So I'm really excited. I think, as technologists, we certainly have a lot of fun stuff to look at over the next 10 years and to implement.
Yeah, and someday my Garmin will agree with my Aura ring about how well I slept last night. I just pick the one that I like the most and I go with that one.
It's actually funny. The other night I had a really bad night of sleep, and I told my wife, I said, I bet you anything my Garmin said I slept really well. And so I looked it up. I was like, yeah, it was like a 93 out of 100 on sleep score. I said, that is incorrect.
That's fantastic. Nathan, during the intro, I mentioned that you also do speaking. Can you talk to us a little bit more about your speaking gigs?
So, I run a podcast. It's called Stimulus Tech Talk, that we talk all about, technology. We bring on guests that are using technology inside their business to enhance, their business. So that's a fun thing that we do. I also usually go speak to small CEO groups through Vistage or some other CEO peer groups. And so that's some of the speaking, more workshop oriented.
Mm.
And I've done some keynotes. It's been fun to kind of incorporate the endurance side of things and talk. I've done actually a keynote on my journey, my Ironman journey, which was fun. To talk about developing habits and using that in business in general. So that's kind of the where we go with the speaking, and it's fun to again travel, and I usually try to find a marathon to do wherever I'm going speaking wise if I can.
That's fantastic. I did a keynote presentation, I think it was last week at this luxury home summit, and it was on financial management habits. And I'm trying to tie that to your purpose and your why overall. And if it can get you to see your long-term purpose and tie it to your financial management habits, maybe you'll actually do the things you need to do to improve your business. But part of that, I talk about my endurance journey and how I love to do Ironman, and I got this podcast. And for the first time ever, somebody came up to me afterwards and said, Greg, I don't want to talk to you about financial management. I want to talk to you about triathlon. And I said, sit down. We're going to have a good time.
It's fun. What's the best race you've done? Or a few races? Where do you enjoy racing?
Yeah, my all-time favorite is Lake Placid, and that's because it was my first. And then the close second is Challenge Roth. And that is just the community, the environment. You felt as if you're in the Tour de France at parts, like you're climbing these hills and the spectators are just outside your handlebars screaming in your face.
Incredible.
Yeah. How about yourself?
Probably my favorite one is in my backyard. It's got to do the St. George Ironman full when it was the World Championship. So I actually signed up when it was just to register for the Ironman, and then they switched the World Championship there it was a 2021, but we actually did a May of 22. So that was an amazing race to be part of the World Championship. So, and then probably my second is New Zealand. So we've done that twice. And then I got a roll down slot to go to Nice this fall. So I will only classify that as my favorite because I actually got a roll down to go to Nice.
Wow. Congratulations. That's awesome. So Nathan, an audience member wants to get in touch with you. What's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Best way is through LinkedIn. So search me up on LinkedIn. Send me a message. Anybody that hears me on this podcast, if you message me on LinkedIn, I'll send you a copy of the book, CEO's Digital Survival Guide. So just link to me there, and love to get connected.
That's awesome. I appreciate that. You know, Nathan, I loved our conversation and how we kind of jumped around from, the 30 years of your business experience and dealing with the recession in 2008. And then really how you personally sort of tackle strategy and business decisions, and you find time to get away once a month and just with you and your thoughts and your past goals. I think that's a really good takeaway for our audience members, of finding that time for us to be with who's most important, and that's yourself, right? Either fitness or mentally or both. And I need to look up this club about the 50 marathons under 4 hours, although I'm nowhere close. But I appreciate you sharing that nugget. Audience members, if you got some value out of today's show, please subscribe. Please share this with your community. Let's get some of these messages that Nathan and I just chatted about out to the greater community. Nathan, again, it's been fantastic having you on the show today.
It's been fun. Thanks so much for having me on.
Thank you for tuning in to the Chief Endurance Officer podcast. To hear more inspiring stories and strategies around the endurance mindset, be sure to subscribe below or visit us at chiefelduranceofficer.com. Until next time, keep pushing those limits.